Where are the top fantasy relevant prospects going to go in the NFL draft? We'll look at Ryan Wilson's latest mock right now on FFT Express. It's Adam and Jamey here, and Ryan Wilson has obviously done great work, and he's done like 1,000 mock drafts, but here's what we've got right now. We've got Fernando Mendoza to the Raiders. Big surprise. Jamey, when do you think Fernando Mendoza becomes the starting quarterback now that they have Kirk Cousins?
I'm hoping within the first month. Look, Cousins may be great for Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty in the offense in Las Vegas sooner or right away, more so than Mendoza, who could, have some growing pains. But, look, I want to see Mendoza play. I want to see what he looks like. I want to see what this offense looks like. I want to see what the future looks like for the Raiders. I think he's, it's kind of interesting to see how this draft class, specifically this quarterback class, is being dissected and how it's being judged. I think Mendoza would be in the conversation to be number one overall in almost any class, where based on how he's performed and all the intangibles. So, I'm excited to see him out there, and I hope he's going to have a Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck impact right away, where those guys were very fantasy relevant almost from the moment that they took over their job. So I'd like to see it sooner rather than later.
All right. Jeremiyah Love to the Titans, 4th overall.
Makes a lot of sense. I think the most ideal landing spot for Love at this point from a rookie perspective would probably be Washington, if you're looking at the teams that have sort of been tied to him. I'm very hopeful that it's not the Cincinnati Bengals, which he took one of his visits to. So let's avoid that for Chase Brown. But look, we see what this team is building towards in Tennessee, and I think it's going to be a lot better with a better Cam Ward, a better play caller in Brian Dable. They continue to build on their offensive line over the last couple of years. And so this isn't my favorite destination because I don't think Pollard and Spears, or at least one of them, go completely away. So he's going to share to some degree. But we've seen how this goes at times also, where a high-profile rookie goes to a team and, becomes the lead option. So this would, put a little bit of a damper on some of the upside for Jeremiyah Love. But it's also one of those teams where Pollard's getting older and kind of struggled at times last year. And, Spears, I think, is what he is. He's a backup, / change of pace third down back that's never really going to materialize into somebody that's extremely fantasy relevant without a clear-cut starting job. So not the worst spot for him, but certainly not my favorite destination. So I would prefer to see him slide down a little bit more and end up with the Washington Commanders at this point.
How about, he doesn't have another skill position player going until the 13th pick, Carnell Tate to the Rams. Oh, boy.
Yeah, I can't hate this more for his rookie profile. But 2027 and beyond, I mean, Devontae Adams is clearly not going to be on the Rams much longer. And who knows what's happening with Puka Nacua at this point, with the stuff that's gone on this offseason. So, for a guy that's headed for what should be a monster contract, especially after what Jackson Smith and Najigba just got, the Rams have to have a lot of trepidation about paying Puka Nacua at this point. So Tate could end up, with whoever the future quarterback is for the Rams, because Matthew Stafford's not going to be there much longer. If he's potentially, and again, I think it's a stretch, but potentially the number one receiver long-term for Sean McVay, you got to love that.
Yeah.
But for 2027 and most likely the early portion of his career, because I do think Puka will hopefully get his life on track and get that long-term deal, then you're looking at Tate as most likely a long-term running mate. So I don't love this destination. This would probably be, of the three guys we've talked about so far, Mendoza, Love, and Tate, my least favorite landing spot for one of the high-profile rookies.
I don't really like many. In fact, this whole mock draft, this first round for Ryan Wilson, is so bad for fantasy. We're going to take a break and tell you
But a lot of it makes sense, though, when you look at it.
It's not a bad mock draft. It just sucks for fantasy, I think. These destinations aren't great. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today Express. All right, so what else am I talking about? This bad mock draft for fantasy. Okay, we got Mendoza to the Raiders, Jeremiyah Love to the Titans, which isn't great necessarily. Carnell Tate to the Rams, which we don't like. How about Makai Lemon to the Jets and Jordyn Tyson to the Steelers? And Kate, we'll just do those two. Lemon and Tyson. Makai Lemon to the Jets at 16, Jordyn Tyson to the Steelers at 21. These are both wide. All these guys are going to be wide receivers, by the way. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, obviously there's a lot to hate about it. Just because it's taking what some people consider to be the number one receiver in this class. I still think Tate is, but Lemon's in the discussion. and you're putting him on a team that has quarterback questions that still would put him, in my opinion, as the number 2 receiver, because I still think Garrett Wilson will be the 1. They need receiver help. I know Adonai Mitchell was added last year and, has the chance to, be a contributor, but I think Mitchell is more of a number 3 and a field stretcher than he is a number 2 guy. So they're going to add a receiver at some point. I would not like it to be Makai Lemon, and I would not like it to be him at 16. So you're right. This would be bad for his fantasy upside. This would be, I hope not a dynasty disaster as well, but it could be a dynasty disaster as well. So yeah, this is one where I hope Ryan is wrong, but I do think the Jets, once they address defense with the 2nd overall pick, they're going to look offense at 16. And if Lemon's still on the board, from their team perspective and their team building, it doesn't make a lot of sense to take one of the better offensive skill players in this draft.
How about Jordyn Tyson to the Steelers, 21?
Yeah, hate that as well. I mean, obviously, from a rookie perspective, you're talking about what would now be an extremely crowded receiving core. If you were to say this before free agency and before the addition of Michael Pittman, okay, yeah, it would be much more encouraging. But now they have Pittman. They signed Pittman to a contract extension. They gave DK Metcalf the big deal last year. They have huge quarterback questions. Mike McCarthy may be there for a couple of years, but I don't think this is a long-term situation. So who knows what the coaching staff will look like for Pittsburgh long-term for Jordyn Tyson. Again, another guy that's in the conversation to be the number 1 receiver in this class. He's got to stay healthy, a lot of injury concerns. I do think that the Steelers probably need to address receiver at some point as well. I would hate to see them do it at this point in the draft, and I would hate to see Tyson go there. So if he does slip to, the 20s and beyond, he's going to be on a lot of people's draft board, just taking best player available. Huge upside, huge potential for Jordyn Tyson. I would just absolutely hate this for not only his rookie season, but maybe for the first couple of years of his career.
Ryan also has the Steelers trading back into the first round with the last pick of the round and getting Ty Simpson, the quarterback from Alabama. But we'll finish with Casey Concepcion, wide receiver, going to the Browns at 24, and another wide receiver, Denzel Boston, going to the Dolphins at 30.
So these aren't bad, I think, fantasy options and bad, team selections as well. Obviously, the Browns receiving core is miserable right now. And so in speaking to somebody who spoke to Todd Monken at the owners meetings, very excited about Harold Fannin, still thinks Jerry Jeudy could be a playmaker, but this is where they're going to go address the rest of their receiving core. And so if Concepcion is still on the board, easily could be number 1 in targets for Cleveland, because Fannin was number 1 last year at 107. So Concepcion can come in and, be the alpha, especially if he stays healthy and can perform at a high level. So I wouldn't hate this one at all. And if you're talking about where he would go in probably rookie only drafts, he's talked about having the 6th or 7th pick. Love is going to go 1 no matter where he ends up. 2, I think, is going to be probably the number 1 receiver. And you can make an argument here that Concepcion might be the best receiver if Tate goes to the Rams, Lemon goes to the Jets, and Tyson goes to the Steelers. I would not have it ranked that way, but I can certainly make the argument for it. So I think Concepcion going to Cleveland would be probably the best selection here outside of Mendoza to the Raiders and Love to the Titans. And then Boston going to the Dolphins. Look, we don't know what the Dolphins receiving core is going to look like right now. I would love to see them, not that I think it's a long-term answer, but maybe a short-term answer. I would love to see them get one of the receivers that are still out there just to help Malik Willis. But clearly this is receiving core right now. You're talking about Jalen Tolbert looks like the number 1 option. And he's the guy that's been throwing with Malik Willis in the offseason. Like, this is bad. And so I think in the case of any rookie that goes there in Boston, what he did at Washington, the history of Washington wide receivers is obviously very up and down right now of what they've done in the NFL, at least the recent group. But again, similar to Concepcion, could be the number 1 guy for that offense right away. So I think both these 2 guys, we talked about this briefly on the full-length episode we did on Wednesday. Concepcion and Boston easily pushed themselves into the first round of rookie-only drafts and in the top 10. Yeah, if this is where they end up.
Boston is he's one of the bigger guys in the class. He's 6'4", 220 or something like that. So very different wide receiver than some of these sort of smaller, shiftier yak guys. That would be potentially the number 1 target for Malik Willis. And maybe he would be the top, if all these scenarios came true, maybe he would be the top rookie to get rookie wide receiver in 2026, that is. Thank you, Jamey. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today.